In a world where silence often masquerades as peace, one voice can shake the spine of tyranny. Today, that voice belongs to a diplomat who doesn't raise his tone, only the temperature of the room. Jaishankar didn't come to whisper warnings. He came to remind a continent that India's patience is strategic, not infinite. And on this July day, a message echoes across Africa's soil, not in anger, but with absolute clarity. Power listens when truth has backup. Diplomacy without deterrence is just decoration. It's like placing velvet curtains over broken windows, or planting roses on a minefield and pretending the soil is safe. Words, no matter how eloquent, cannot substitute for strength. Not in a world where ambition feeds on weakness and chaos has many admirers. Nations do not respect charm. They respect calculation. Jaishankar's message is not born out of arrogance. It's the echo of history's lessons that diplomacy alone is powerless if it lacks the leverage to be feared. A handshake means little if the other hand is too weak to hold a sword when the talking ends. In geopolitical arenas, especially ones as volatile as West Africa, leaders understand this better than anyone. A trade may speak like a revolutionary, but even revolutionaries must pause when facing a nation whose diplomacy is backed by something more than documents and declarations. India, under Modi's leadership, has moved past the age of pleading for acknowledgement. Today, it comes to the table with leverage, economic, technological, and military. This leverage isn't flaunted, it's understood, and that understanding changes everything. Burkina Faso, like many strategically placed but conflict-prone nations, has long been used to diplomacy as theater. Leaders visit, make grand speeches, and leave. But when Jaishankar speaks, there's no theater, there's tension. Because his words don't just sound wise, they carry weight. Without deterrence, diplomacy becomes a performance for cameras, not a protection for people. You cannot negotiate with a man who sees you as toothless. Every word will be dismissed, every warning ignored. But when diplomacy stands on the foundation of strength, strength that is demonstrated, not just declared, suddenly the room listens. Suddenly, eyes narrow and plans change. Priori may be new to the global chessboard, but he's not blind. He sees what happened in other parts of the world when countries underestimated silent powers. And India, for all its cultural humility, has mastered the art of controlled assertion. It doesn't announce its moves. It lets others realize, too late, that the moves were already made. A satellite here, a defense pact there, a strategic port suddenly operational. By the time the threat is perceived, the deterrent is already in place. This is why Jaishankar's words sting deeper than missiles, because behind his polite phrasing is the unmistakable presence of India's readiness, not for war, but for resolve, for ensuring that its interests are never compromised by the illusions of small-time dictatorships or erratic alliances. Diplomacy with deterrence is not warmongering, it's insurance. It's the reason weak nations survive next to strong ones. It's the reason threats don't become tragedies. Charya may think his fiery speeches ignite pride among his followers, but when he looks into Jaishankar's eyes, he sees something far more dangerous than anger. He sees calm, cold, calculated calm, the kind that belongs to men who never bluff. And it's that calm that forces real leaders to reevaluate. Because when a diplomat speaks softly yet walks in the shadow of global weapons and alliances, It's no longer a discussion, it's a warning disguised as courtesy. This is the art of diplomacy with teeth, with muscle, with purpose. India isn't threatening Burkina Faso. It's reminding it that the world is watching, that alliances matter, that actions have consequences, that sovereignty is not a license for recklessness, and that the era of passive diplomacy, of leaders who talk big but carry nothing, is over. If Traore wants to walk among giants, he must understand the ground he walks on. That ground is not just shaped by ambition, but by deterrence. A nation like India doesn't need to raise its voice. Its presence is loud enough. That is the kind of diplomacy the New World respects. Not decorative, not fragile, but fused with the unmistakable edge of power held in reserve. When you challenge calm waters, beware the storm beneath. There is a reason the ocean's stillness unsettles sailors. A sea that rests without a ripple does not promise peace. It warns of pressure, of power held just beneath the surface, waiting, controlled, silent, unshaken, until provoked. That's what makes true strength terrifying. It doesn't need to announce itself. It simply waits until someone makes the mistake of testing it. This is the nature of diplomacy when backed by legacy, by strategy, and by unshakable intent. For leaders like Jaishankar, silence is not absence, it is readiness. And those who misread that silence, who confuse restraint for weakness, often learn too late that they've awakened something they cannot contain. Harari may see India as composed, measured, courteous, and it is. But when he tries to test those waters, to stir what he doesn't fully understand, he risks unearthing consequences far beyond his expectations, because calm waters are not without depth. They conceal tides that shift without warning. India, for years, has played the long game. While others blustered and postured, it prepared. It built relationships instead of headlines. It refined strategies instead of chaos. It chose patience over provocation. But patience is not permanent. It is a choice made by those who know they can act but choose not to. When that patience runs thin, when provocation becomes pattern, the storm underneath begins to stir, not with noise, with precision. Right? India doesn't react for show. It moves when the world least expects it, with the full weight of 1 billion voices behind it, a storm of history, capability, and resolve. This is what Traore forgets when he plays with tone, when he flirts with alignment that betrays regional peace. He doesn't see the ripple he's creating in waters that seem still. But Jaishankar sees it. And more importantly, he controls the storm beneath. There is danger in misreading silence. The calm before a diplomatic reckoning is not kindness. It is calculation, measured, monitored, mapped. For every provocation that seems ignored, there are 100 eyes watching, remembering, preparing. And when the moment comes, when the threshold is crossed, India doesn't retaliate emotionally. It responds structurally, politically, militarily, with alliances that span continents, with data, with deployment, with doctrine. This is not aggression. This is deterrence, rising like thunder from a once quiet sky. Leaders like Traore thrive in noise. but they fail in silence. They mistake lack of confrontation for lack of capacity. They see no shouting and assume no spine. But when that silence breaks, it doesn't break like glass, it breaks like a dam. Everything held back comes forward at once. The world has watched this pattern too many times. Calm nations, provoked beyond reason, rise with storms no one predicted. And those who once mocked their patience end up overwhelmed by their precision. Because when strength is quiet, it is not passive. It is simply choosing when to speak. Jaishankar is not sending threats. He's sending warnings, coded in civility, layered in logic. But beneath that tone, beneath the calm, lies the unspoken message. Test this nation and you will see what lies below the surface. You will see how India responds when diplomacy is no longer respected, when silence is mistaken for surrender. The storm beneath is not fury, it is focus. It is the convergence of preparation and resolve. And once it rises, there is no turning it back. This is what happens when calm waters are challenged too many times. The storm answers, and it never speaks twice. Respect is an ask. It's commanded by preparation. In the world of power, no one gives you respect because you demand it. They give it because they have to, because they've seen what you're capable of, because your silence is strategic, your movements are intentional, and your readiness is undeniable. This is the philosophy that leaders like Jaishankar understand to the bone. He doesn't enter a room to beg for validation. He doesn't carry India's reputation in a briefcase. He carries it like armor. Every conversation he begins already stands on a foundation of decades of preparation, of defense upgrades, of foreign policy recalibrations, of global alliances quietly cemented while others were busy shouting slow. Respect is not about titles or speeches. It's about the quiet moments that precede confrontation. When a nation pauses before making a decision, not because it fears retaliation, but because it knows the other side is ready. India's readiness is not theatrical. It's not meant for headlines. It's slow, methodical, and sometimes invisible, until the day it needs to be seen. And on that day, it is unmistakable. You see, a country doesn't earn respect by flaunting weapons or threatening force. It earns it by making sure every option, from war to words, is sharpened and strategic. That's preparation. It's satellites in the sky, but also diplomats in the corridors of the UN. It's joint military drills on one hand, and economic corridor deals on the other. It's knowing that if a conversation fails, the consequences are already locked in. Terry may think respect comes from fire and fury, from loud declarations and populist bravado, but Jaishankar operates on a different frequency. He knows that Burkina Faso doesn't need to be threatened. It needs to be shown what India has become, a nation not just of culture and code, but of calculus. One that doesn't need to dominate the stage because it's already rewritten the script. Preparation isn't sexy, it doesn't trend, it doesn't fill the airwaves, but it's the only thing that holds up when the world starts to shake. You don't prepare because you expect war. You prepare so that war never comes. You prepare so thoroughly that even your rivals hesitate, calculating the cost of testing your patience. This is why India, even when it doesn't raise its voice, commands space. Why Jaishankar, even in restrained language, sends tremors. It's not what he says, it's what he doesn't have to say. That's the mark of a nation prepared for every outcome. When your opponents know you have options, real, strategic, immediate options, They treat your words with weight, and weight is where respect begins. Not in ego, not in history, but in readiness, in the kind of preparation that reshapes diplomacy itself. Trey Ray may still be learning that, but the message has been sent. When you face a nation that's prepared for sanctions, for disruptions, even for confrontation, you tread more carefully. You listen more closely. You remember that respect isn't a gift. It's an outcome. It's the outcome of nations that invest when others are distracted, that map long-term strategies while others chase short-term applause, that train for years so they don't have to fight for hours, that build coalitions so their voice is never alone. Respect is born from this kind of discipline. India doesn't walk into meetings to demand a seat at the table. It already knows the table was built in part because it exists. That's the quiet authority of preparation. And that's why when Jaishankar speaks, even softly, the room listens. Not because he's louder, but because he's ready. Ready for silence. Ready for response. Ready for anything. Sometimes a nation's silence is the loading of its arsenal. It's easy to misread quiet as fear, to assume that because a country doesn't bark, it won't bite. But history has shown time and again that the most dangerous moments are not when the war drums beat, but when they stop. When a country no longer argues, no longer warns, no longer pleads. That's not surrender. That's the final breath before something irreversible begins. India, for much of its modern history, has chosen restraint, not because it lacks strength, but because it understands the cost of unleashing it. There is maturity in not reacting immediately, in choosing diplomacy even when provoked. But when that restraint is mistaken for submission, something ancient awakens in the spine of the nation, and silence begins to take a new form. Not passive, but preparatory. Silence is not emptiness, it is action hidden from the spotlight. It is the aircraft being fueled, the cyber units running simulations, the satellite eyes recalibrating their focus. It is the war rooms glowing under midnight light, the drills no one is allowed to film. It is the arsenal being counted, updated, modernized, all without a single word spoken to the outside world. This is the kind of silence that Jaishankar represents, one where words are used like instruments, not weapons. But while he speaks softly in public, the machinery behind him never stops. India's readiness does not depend on declarations. It moves quietly because quiet allows precision, because noise invites distraction, and India has no time to be distracted. When Trey or others assume they can step across lines without consequence, they mistake stillness for softness. They think if India doesn't respond immediately, it never will. But silence in moments like these is a message louder than threats. It means the country has entered a new mode, no longer negotiating for safety, but ensuring it, with or without your permission. In the silence, embassies are advised, borders are reinforced, allies are briefed, contingency plans are no longer theoretical, and the arsenal, not just of weapons, but of information, influence, strategy, is brought to readiness, quietly, efficiently, without fanfare. This is not aggression, it is resolve. A nation may smile in dialogue, but that does not mean it sleeps, it watches, it counts, it waits. And when the time comes, the silence is shattered, not by a shout, but by action so decisive, so sudden, that those who thought they had time are left scrambling. This is what leaders like Trary need to understand. When India goes quiet, it's not because it has nothing to say. It's because everything that needs to be said is already being built behind the scenes, in labs, in bases, in encrypted rooms, where the next move is being measured down to the last second. And when that mood comes, there is no announcement, no need to convince the world, because the world will already be watching. It will see a nation that was underestimated, disrespected, perhaps even challenged, rise without noise, but with absolute authority. That is the power of silent readiness. That is the meaning of a loaded arsenal behind closed doors. When diplomacy is met with denial and warnings are met with mockery, the silence that follows is not defeat. It's the calm precision of a country done talking. India has learned from every insult, from every cross-border betrayal, from every delayed response that cost lives. And now it moves differently, not loudly, not carelessly, but with the certainty of a nation that has nothing to prove, only something to protect. So when Jaishankar's tone shifts from warning to stillness, when India no longer reminds, that's not hesitation. That's preparation at full throttle. And those who don't recognize that silence will be the first to feel what it was hiding.